Yamcha is incredibly weak, and no matter what he does, no matter how hard he seems to train, if he even does, it seems like Yamcha has never been able to really catch up to anyone.
Yo, Yamcha, that's why you lost more, bro. Legit, kill your ass, and kill this, and this is why we don't all shit like this, and you pull into this episode, son. Like,
10 fighters, eh? With 10 spots to fill up and getting an invitation for sure. Yamcha seems to be one of the most parodied and laughed at characters in the Dragon Ball universe. Maybe the most, I would say. To the point where the Japanese actually released an action figure of him dying. There's a video on my channel with me just laughing hysterically at it.
I didn't bring Chucks with Yamcha. These guys are too dangerous for them.
Yamcha, of course. And it's even going so far, you bring Yamcha. That's when you get washed.
Yamcha, you fucking suck. I can't do.
In Plate 91 of the Complete Poetry and Prose of William Blake, Blake writes, "It is easier to forgive an enemy than to forgive a friend." I want you to hold on to this quote in the back of your mind, as it will make sense later. Humiliated at every turn and ridiculed into oblivion, it seems Yamcha has been little more than an object of derision in the Dragon Ball series. But is this fair? Is Yamcha really just some useless buffoon, shambling and scraping his way around in the shadows of better men? Or could he actually possess some of the most shocking and unexpected latent potential in the entire Dragon Ball franchise? Let's find out. Our story begins in age 749. A certain young bandit manages to get the drop on an even younger Goku in the desert.
Okay, boys, enough talk. Either hand over your goods or prepare to fight me.
I don't want to fight you, but if I have to defend my friends, I will.
Moments before landing the decisive blow, he relents when Bulma met his gaze. Not content with letting his mark off the hook, Yamcha decides to follow Goku and Bulma around while keeping a safe distance. Yamcha periodically tries to attack the group and abscond with valuables multiple times before finally being bested and deciding to ultimately join his quarry on his quest for the Dragon Balls. With time, Yamcha reforms and grows into a trusted ally, becoming a fully fledged Z-warrior. He remains a mainstay for quite some time in the series. That is, until we bear witness to the dawn of a new age. The age of the Super Saiyan.
This time you're going to pay, Frieza!
Now some might argue that Yamcha's decline began long before this moment, but none will argue that it was all but assured by the time we saw Goku blacken the skies, causing the heavens to shake. Seeing the legend of the Super Saiyan being reborn was truly unprecedented in the Dragon Ball universe at the time. But little did we know just how absurd the power structure of the Dragon Ball series would become.
「
Yamcha, along with many others, all but faded into obscurity. At least in terms of raw power. So what exactly is Yamcha's true potential? Does he have any potential to talk about in the first place? This is what you and I will discuss today. Objectively speaking, there seems to be two possible paths for Yamcha in the series going forward. The first is the one I feel would have granted Yamcha the profound reverence that legacy characters like him so rightly deserve, and that is, not surprisingly, the hero's death. Now, Dragon Ball has actually treaded this path before, but for whatever reason, perhaps they decide that members of the Z Warriors having a definitive end would be too heavy-handed, too harsh for a TV show mostly viewed by youngsters. But at the same time, it's quite fine to see people getting tortured, impaled, dismembered, and decapitated. Glaring logical inconsistencies notwithstanding, we've seen characters like Grandpa Gohan never return from the afterlife outside of very brief cameos. So, my question is, why just him? Why does Dragon Ball have such a problem with letting characters go? Is it really better to keep them around just for them to be turned into laughingstocks? In my opinion, I feel that character deaths can be an important element of storytelling. And in cases where characters are shown to be all but obsolete, it could even be considered a kindness. I believe Yamcha still deserves this honor. Sure, it might be a little rough seeing Yamcha get put down for the final time, but to that I say, we probably would have seen Yamcha celebrated in the same way Grandpa Gohan was, had they just allowed his sacrifice in the Saiyan saga to be given the lasting impact that it deserved, where Gohan was named after the man who taught Goku the kind ways of humanity. Who knows? Maybe Goten or Trunks could have been named after Yamcha in honor of the man who bravely fought to protect his friends. Instead, Yamcha was brought back, only to bear witness to his decline of relevancy in 4K, getting rejected by Bulma, being made fun of by everyone for literal decades, and just generally having his name dragged through the dirt at every turn. Was this really better than just letting him go out on his shield? Where exactly does one draw the line between making jokes and just outright bullying and belittling a character for no reason? I'll leave that for you to decide. Secondly, and this might be quite shocking for some of you to hear, but I genuinely feel that Yamcha has the potential to be the greatest villain we've ever seen in the Dragon Ball franchise. You heard that right. I said greatest. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yamcha? The greatest villain in all of Dragon Ball? Are you talking about the guy who got taken out by a Cyberman of all things? The guy who literally got fatality'd by Dr. Gero in 5 seconds flat? The guy who was so weak that Goku didn't even invite him to compete in the Tournament of Power? I get it, but just hear me out. I want you to think about this. Think about what makes a great villain. Think about guys like the Joker, Harvey Dent, and Lex Luthor. These characters show us that power is not really even a prerequisite to be a villain. Clearly, there is a difference between being the greatest villain and the most powerful one. So then what is it about these guys that makes them so venerable, so threatening, so dangerous? It's not an easy thing to quantify, but I feel as though it has something to do with the fact that due to their motivations, they can sometimes blur the lines between the good guys and the bad guys. Perhaps it's their unpredictability, the fact that they are often the ones that the heroes didn't see coming. The ones who, at one point, were so close to the heroes in some way, But somewhere along the lines, things just became twisted. Maybe it's the fact that they scare you because you can understand them. Because of this, I believe Yamcha would excel in this role. How and why? I'm glad you asked. Let's start with Yamcha being a human. A lot of people dismiss human characters in Dragon Ball for some reason. People also forget about the less measurable metrics that truly make humans so perilous. Things like human nature, resourcefulness, and their fragile mental states. We've seen what human emotions like anger and love can do for Saiyans, but what about some of the less glamorous emotions, such as jealousy, resentment, and pain? You see, humans are inherently fickle, and for many, such emotions can forge a strong impetus within them. Seeing Vegeta start a family with Bulma, who was once the apple of Yamcha's eye, probably still stings to this day. In fact, Yamcha could easily resent Krillin and Goku as well, as all three of them have settled down. Heck, even Gohan has run ahead of him in that regard. Naturally, this could make Yamcha feel unwanted, make him feel like everyone has a perfect life besides him. Yamcha trained with Goku and the rest of the Z Warriors for most of the best years of his life, but over time he went from being a rival and close ally to Goku to now being a joke, to the point where the Z Warriors pretty much go out of their way not to call on him to help out these days. This, as you can imagine, is enough to make anyone feel inadequate and dejected. And of course, it's no secret how the majority of Dragon Ball fans view Yamcha. So, as you can see, Yamcha has no shortage of reasons to be filled with indignation and hatred. After all, it's only human. So that takes care of the why. Now for the how. It's hard to really get into specifics without this video being 2 hours long, but in essence, Yamcha can quite feasibly get the upper hand over the Z Warriors using guerrilla tactics. Now for this to work, based on the reasons I've listed before, we're going to be assuming that Yamcha now has a strong resentment towards his friends, is aware of his limits, and is going to take steps to be calculated, secretive, and patient in his approach. He has swindled and spied on people before to get the drop on them in his days as a bandit. So we know that he is capable of concocting schemes and assaulting unsuspecting targets. And besides, for all their godly power, we've seen guys like Ginyu, Komasan, Babidi, and Garlic Jr. get the better of Goku and Vegeta in the past. So even though they are the biggest hurdles for Yamcha to overcome, we know that they are also susceptible to tricks and being duped. Gathering the Dragon Balls wouldn't hurt either, but they carry the greatest risk of being discovered. So I think Yamcha would be better off doing things quietly and getting his hands on 3 key things: Bulma's time machine blueprints, a sample of the Blackwater Mist, which may or may not still exist at Kame's lookout, and he'd need to form an alliance with Red Pharmaceuticals, formerly known as the Red Ribbon Army. The time machine blueprints will act as an insurance policy, or Plan B if you will, while the Blackwater Mist will be Yamcha's main path to villainy, and Red Pharma is the key to realizing both potential scenarios I've come up with. So let's quickly go through them. After being ridiculed for years, Yamcha finally snaps and becomes flagrantly vindictive. He sets out to forge an alliance with Red Pharma by promising them he can restore them to the military superpower they once were. He then sneaks into the lookout and steals a bottle of the Blackwater Mist. He hands this sample over to Red Pharma for analysis. The plan is to chemically refine the compound, use it as a base, and lace it with the heart virus Goku contracted in the Android saga to amplify its effects. Trunks mentioned that the virus became a plague in his timeline, so finding a sample of it may require Yamcha to travel to future Trunks' timeline, which is why Yamcha has also taken steps to obtain the blueprints to Bulma's time machine by sneaking into Capsule Corp. This can be handed over to Red Farmer, and the machine can then be built and used as necessary. Puar can also help out with getting anything Yamcha needs thanks to his shapeshifting ability. And since he is fiercely loyal to Yamcha and has helped him with illicit dealings in the past, he should have no issues doing anything Yamcha asks. After getting everything he needs, Yamcha instructs Red Farmer to mass produce this modified black water mist formula. He can then set out to cause havoc by destroying towns and taking out civilians to challenge the Z Warriors. Inevitably, Goku and Vegeta will overpower him, but Yamcha doesn't need to defeat them. He only needs to buy time and last for about 5 to 10 minutes, after which he can unveil his true plan. Chemical bombs containing the modified formula that are set to go off and spread the poison across the 7 wind currents and the oceans, infecting the entire globe with a virus powerful enough to take out everyone, including Super Saiyans. Since these would technically count as natural deaths, the heroes would not be able to use the Dragon Balls to revive anyone. The Senzu Beans won't help either, and unless they can convince Whis to break out a temporal do-over, which, by the way, is only good for going back 3 minutes, the Earth of Universe 7 will have finally seen its darkest hour, as Yamcha takes his revenge on everyone who poked fun at him and belittled him, and can make his escape using the time machine, while the Z Warriors scramble in vain to find a way to avert the crisis. There are a few other grandiose scenarios I came up with, where Yamcha could really be elevated to sinister supervillain status. Essentially, painting Yamcha to be the one person indirectly responsible for the creation of nearly every single other villain in the series. But I think you get the idea. I truly feel that Yamcha has some of the best motivations and backstory to become that true tragic villain in the series. His betrayal will feel so organic and impactful because all of us, the writers, the Dragon Ball cast, and the fans have played a role in pushing him over the edge. It will be a different kind of challenge for the Z Warriors to overcome. It will test them in a way we have never seen them tested before, especially Goku. And this is where we come full circle to the quote that I asked you to keep in the back of your mind at the beginning of this video. It is easier to forgive an enemy than to forgive a friend. And that is because we've seen Goku show compassion and mercy to villains before. Maybe he arrived at this decision to give them a second chance so easily because he didn't have any sort of connection to them. But would Goku be able to extend that olive branch so easily to someone who has hurt him and everyone else on such a deep and personal level? Someone who he trusted for years. Someone who he might have been partially responsible for turning into a monster. I'd wager that forming a fist against someone who you considered to be a brother is a little harder than doing so against an alien, a cyborg, or a demon. Can you really forgive them when you know you just as well might be putting the knife in their hand again, just so they can stab you in the back and twist the blade even worse later? And even after Goku makes that decision, how will everyone else react in such a scenario? Would it finally cause a rift in the team and divide the Z Warriors forever? Could we possibly, for the first time, see a civil war situation arise depending on whatever decision Goku makes? As you can see, Yamcha may never be the most powerful villain, but he definitely could quite easily be the one that causes the most damage. We've seen them try to do villains with a personal touch, multiple times actually, with reskinned or manipulated versions of both Goku and Vegeta, but nothing like this. Call me crazy, But I think Dragon Ball Super would have been a lot more interesting if we got a Yamcha Black arc, rather than a Goku Black or Clone Vegeta saga. Now guys, I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that Yamcha is actually a god-tier character. Of course not. That would be ridiculous. What I am saying is that he definitely doesn't deserve all the hate that comes his way. Nobody ever talks about the fact that Yamcha was one of the first few characters ever in Dragon Ball to fight evenly with Goku. People always say, oh, it's because Goku was a kid back then. Sure, a kid who literally could take out one of the most powerful armies on Earth single-handedly. Or how about the fact that Yamcha is one of the only characters in Dragon Ball to actually create his own techniques? But what about the time when he got put down by a scrubby Cyberman? You guys do realize that Cybermen are nearly on par with Raditz, right? The same guy that Piccolo and Goku had to double team to beat? Oh, but what about the time when he got one-shotted by the android so easily? Guys, let's be real. Nobody had an easy time with any of the androids. Alright? Yamcha got caught off guard, he got jumped. It happens, okay? Don't believe me? Just ask Goku, a literal demigod these days, who got caught lacking by who? Sorbet? With an intergalactic Saturday night special? Would you even have referred to this guy as anything other than generic Freezer-goon if I didn't say his name just now? Come on guys. Listen, I digress. Is it true that Yamcha will never be a top tier guy? More than likely. But he definitely isn't as bad as people make him out to be. Despite being severely outmatched most of the time, guess who is always willing to risk everything to stand up for his friends? He has always been someone you can count on to have your back, win or lose. He's the kind of guy who takes all of the beatings so that his friends don't have to. Unlike some other Z-warriors who always seem to make a habit of being fashionably late.
Bruh.
Wow.
In the end, people can call Yamcha many names. A weakling, a journeyman, a loser, Gohan's biological father. But one thing nobody can call him is a coward. If all of that doesn't deserve respect, I don't know what does.
Let's make it a good one. I'm coming out on top this time.
Yamcha?
Who are you?